Harpreet Singh Mocha, and I serve as a National Program Manager on issues dealing with Muslims, Arabs, Sikhs, South Asians, and Hindu communities. I oversee this program, and this will be a 90-minute information session on resources, programs, and tools to assist communities in securing places of worship. We thank you for your attendance. This program will be recorded. I will be going over the agenda and some quick housekeeping rules, but before that, I'd like to introduce the Department of Justice Community Relations Service Director, Paul Montero. Director Montero.
Thank you very much, Harpreet, and good afternoon to everyone. Good morning, depending on where you are in the country. My name is Paul Montero. I have the privilege of serving as the Director of the Community Relations Service. I'm speaking to you live from our headquarters here in Washington, D.C. I've been in the role about a month, but CRS has been around doing the critical work of being America's peacemaker for 58 years. It was created by the Civil Rights Act of 1964 that created this special place that has highly skilled conciliation specialists, subject matter experts like Harpreet, that deploy to communities where you have conflict based on race, color, and national origin. Our mandate was expanded in 2009 through the Shepherd-Byrd Hate Crimes Prevention Act, where we actively work to try to prevent the commission of hate crimes based on religion and other protected traits. We take this issue very seriously, and violence or the threat of violence anywhere targeting any congregation or community should be of concern to all Americans. So we're proud to do this work through 14 offices around the country. I encourage you to find one of the CRS offices nearest you and connect with our regional directors and conciliation specialists. If you have any questions, we offer 4 specific services: mediation, facilitated dialogue, consultation, and training. And this program today with our federal partners that we're so honored to have on the line with us falls squarely in that bucket of hopefully equipping you with relevant and timely information that can be useful to you on this very important subject. So I just want to thank you all for making time to join this webinar, and I'll turn it back to you, Harpreet.
Thank you, Director Montero. I wanted to now go over the agenda and some quick housekeeping rules. First, we would like you to please keep your mics on mute and turn your cameras off. 2, please submit your questions in the chat. We will have a Q&A session a little later after the 3 presentations are complete. So please, if you have questions while or during the presentations, please put them in the chat, and then we'll duly review them and ask them during the Q&A session. And then also, number 3, at the end, after the Q&A sessions, we will have closing and evaluations. Please do, fill out those evaluations. We are always in a continuous effort to improve this program. So please let us know what worked, what didn't work, what we can do better to serve your needs. With that, I wanted to go over the agenda. Like I said before, this is a 90-minute information session. Our first speaker will be Michael Campion. He serves as the Chief of the Civil Rights Section at the U.S. Attorney's Office at the United States Attorney's Office for District of New Jersey. He'll be covering overview of hate crimes laws and federal investigation on the federal side. The second speaker will be covering securing places of worship and an overview of active shooter training. And that gentleman's name is Stephen Long. He serves as a protective security advisor at the Cyber and Infrastructure Security Agency at the Homeland Security. And our third speaker is Mark Severa, who serves as a senior advisor and branch chief at FEMA. He will be going over grants, especially the nonprofit security grant, and sharing all the best practices and information about when to apply for that grant and how you can apply for it and go from there, and how you can use it as well. And thereafter, we will complete the session with a Q&A, and then after that, we'll do a closing, and we'll hopefully have y'all fill in those evaluations. We will share resources. Many of the resources that the presenters will be speaking of will be sent to you via email after the presentation. So without further ado, let's roll up our sleeves and get started. I'm going to hand the baton off to our friend from the U.S. Attorney's Office, Michael Campion. Michael?
Thanks, Harpreet. And thank you, everyone, for allowing me the opportunity to be part of this presentation today. As Harpreet was noted, I'm Michael Campion. I am Chief of the Civil Rights Division at the U.S. Attorney's Office in the District of New Jersey. This U.S. Attorney's Office, like all U.S. Attorney's offices, is a component of the Justice Department. The Justice Department has prioritized combating hate. As part of that effort, my office and U.S. Attorney's offices around the country are meeting with many communities to discuss efforts to combat and prevent hate. Our coordinated efforts is through a program titled United Against Hate, Identifying, Reporting, and Preventing Hate Crimes. We've all seen all too often how individuals filled with hate have unleashed horrific violence on marginalized communities and places of worship. We recently witnessed the terrible massacre at the Tops Market in Buffalo that claimed 10 lives and tragically impacted so many more. And just the last few years, we've seen other hate-fueled massacres, like at the Walmart in El Paso, Texas, the Tree of Life Synagogue in Pittsburgh, the Mother Emanuel AME Church in Charleston, South Carolina, and the Sikh Temple in Oak Creek, Wisconsin, just to name a few. All of these tragedies, of course, left permanent marks in our hearts. And there have also been other numerous incidents that did not garner international media attention, but impacted their communities deeply all the same. So today, the presentation that I'm going to be going over is an opportunity to learn more about hate crimes, what the Justice Department, the U.S. Attorney's Offices, the FBI can do to combat hate crimes through prosecution and other efforts, and as well as discuss some of the resources that are available. But I'll cut to the chase. The most important thing about my part of the presentation today is not what happens during this presentation. It's what happens after this presentation when we all move on with our days and our months. We hope that this presentation will encourage you to report a hate crime or hate incident if you see one. And maybe, hopefully, this presentation will encourage you to contact CRS or other federal partners in your local U.S. Attorney's Office to ask about resources and training that we may be able to provide to troubleshoot a situation or work with you on prevention. So let's go to the next slide, please. Okay, so what is a hate crime? In general, a hate crime is a criminal offense such as murder, assault, arson, vandalism, or threats that is motivated by one's hate against a group of people or a class of people protected by law. Now, the term hate can be a little bit misleading. While individuals who commit hate crimes often hate everyone who has the characteristic of the targeted victim, most hate crime laws only require that the crime be committed because of those characteristics. Thus, there's usually no requirement that prosecutors prove that the defendant universally hated everyone with that particular characteristic. So let's go to the next slide. So what are these protected classes? So the following classes of people are protected under some, but not all, of the federal hate crime statutes: race, color, national origin, religion, disability, sexual orientation, family status, sex, gender, and gender identity. And as we'll discuss a little later, there are also federal and state laws that protect these classes from some conduct that does not constitute a crime. Let's go to the next slide, please. So here's a brief overview of the relevant federal hate crime statutes. As you can see from this slide, hate crimes statutes are not new. Hate crimes are not new. Congress passed the first hate crime law in the aftermath of the Civil War following the abolition of slavery to address violence aimed at Black Americans. Even though this law is about 150 years old, federal prosecutors still use it today. And over the last 50 plus years or so, Congress has passed additional laws to protect people renting or buying a home or apartment, exercising their religion, or engaging in certain other important activities. In the 1990s, after a spate of church bombings or church burnings, Congress added new protections for places of worship. And then 2009, under the Shepard-Byrd Hate Crime Prevention Act, Congress again expanded the scope of federal hate crimes to include other protected categories. In 2021, Congress passed the COVID-19 Hate Crime Prevention Act in response to a spike in hate incidents against Asian American and Pacific Islander communities during the COVID-19 pandemic. And then in early this year, Congress passed and the president signed into law the Emmett Till Anti-Lynching Act, named after Emmett Till, a 14-year-old Black boy who was kidnapped, tortured, and murdered in Mississippi in 1955 after being falsely accused of whistling at a white woman. The bill, for the first time, specifically defined lynching as a federal hate crime. Let's go to the next slide, please. So sometimes we get a question, or some may wonder, why we need hate crime laws when the criminal acts themselves are already covered under criminal law. Well, hate crime prosecutions matter for several reasons. They matter because the impact of hate crimes is felt beyond the immediate victim of the crime and that person's family. Hate crimes also traumatize others who share traits with the victim, as well as the victim's community, sometimes even the entire nation. People who commit hate crimes often intend to frighten all members of a specific community who share that targeted trait. And they can come with a chilling message: get out of here or you'll be next. So following a hate crime, victims, members of that group, and the greater community may feel afraid when carrying out normal daily functions at home, work, schools, local businesses, a place of worship, and no longer feel safe to live their daily lives. Further, attacks motivated by bias tend to be more violent than other attacks. Plus, perpetrators of hate crimes are more likely to commit them again. So prioritizing hate crimes gets dangerous offenders off the street. It sends a message to members of the targeted groups that they are valued members of society and that their protection matters. And hate crime charges can be an important recognition that the crime committed not only was an attack against the specific victim, but also an attack against the entire community. And these charges may also increase the punishment that the perpetrator faces. Let's move on to the next slide, please. Most states and U.S. territories have hate crime statutes that are enforced by state and local law enforcement and state and local courts. These are different than the federal hate crime statutes, though there's certainly overlap. Hate crime laws in states and territories vary widely in terms of which classes are protected, whether and how criminal penalties are addressed, whether laws allow for a victim to sue for damage, the range of crimes covered, whether the laws contain hate crime reporting requirements, and whether the laws require training of law enforcement personnel. In the state where I'm located, New Jersey, there's a very broad and expansive hate crime statute. the point here is the law is different in each state, and so we encourage you to connect with your state and local governments as well. Let's move on to the next slide, please. We spoke a bit about the federal hate crime statutes. I'm going to highlight two that are particularly relevant to today's discussion. Under the Church Arson Prevention Act, it may be a crime to intentionally deface, damage, or destroy any religious real property or an attempt to do so because of the religious characteristic of that property. Here in this slide, we have a photo of an example of defacing and damaging religious property here of the Islamic Center of America. It's also potentially a crime to obstruct by force or threat of force a person in the enjoyment of free exercise of religion. And keep that thought in mind as we'll go over a recent and disturbing example. Let's move on to the next slide, please. Under the Shepherd-Bird Hate Crime Prevention Act, which is also a very relevant statute to today's discussion, it is a hate crime to willfully cause bodily injury to a person, or again, an attempt to do so, through the use of fire, a firearm, a dangerous weapon, or an explosive or incendiary device, because of the victim's actual or perceived race, color, religion, national origin, gender identity, sexual orientation, or disability. Let's move to the next slide, please. We're likely all sadly familiar with the attack on the Tree of Life Synagogue in Pittsburgh. In that case, multiple hate crime charges were brought by the Justice Department. According to the complaint filed by the Justice Department's Civil Rights Division and the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Western District of Pennsylvania, while congregants gathered to worship, the perpetrator entered the synagogue with multiple firearms, opened fire, and killed and injured congregants. He was charged with 63 counts, including multiple violations of the Church Arson Prevention Act, because through his actions, as we alleged, he intentionally obstructed free exercise by force, and through the Shepherd-Bird Hate Crime Prevention Act because of his use of a firearm in harming people because of actual or perceived religion. This is not the only hate crime case brought by the Justice Department or my office. Recently, my office brought 2 hate crime charges, which I'll briefly highlight. 2 months ago, my office charged a New Jersey man with a federal hate crime, or multiple federal hate crimes, for attacks on members of the Orthodox Jewish community by using an automobile to attack visibly identifiable members of the Orthodox Jewish community in the Lakewood, New Jersey area. In November of last year, in a prosecution that my office was involved in, a federal court sentenced a New Jersey man to prison for conspiring with members of a white supremacist hate group to vandalize synagogues. And around the country, U.S. attorneys' offices and the Justice Department's Civil Rights Division is bringing other hate crime cases. To name just a few, in April of this year in Minnesota, 2 men were sentenced to prison for their role in the 2017 bombing of the Minnesota Islamic Center. In March of this year, the Justice Department brought hate crime charges against a Texas man for setting fire to a synagogue in Austin. And then in February of this year, a Tennessee man was sentenced to 7 years in prison for setting fire to 4 Nashville area churches. Let's move on to the next slide. So sometimes we get a question, and some may wonder, including perhaps some of your congregants, why someone was not arrested for spewing hate-filled and hurtful messages. Why isn't hate speech illegal, some may ask. Under the First Amendment of the Constitution, people have a right to express themselves, even if their message is one of hate, even if it is offensive. This same amendment allows all of us to freely speak our minds, live in a country with a free press, petition the government, and practice whatever religion we choose or none at all. But even with the First Amendment, there are limits to free speech, particularly when that speech is advocating or threatening violence or encouraging people to commit crimes. Then, depending on the circumstances, it may be considered a hate crime. If speech is connected with true threats, meaning statements where the speaker means to communicate a serious expression of an intent to commit an act of unlawful violence to particular individuals, those statements are outside the bounds of protected speech. And regardless of whether the concerning conduct is protected speech, we want to encourage all of you to report any such incidents to law enforcement, because it may alert authorities to an ongoing threat or help with the investigation of a later hate crime. And one thing we want to just highlight, which we do at all of our presentations, we want to highlight those parents, to those who have children, and I'm sure this includes many of your congregants, that certain hate organizations seek to recruit teenagers through online forums and chat rooms, internet games, and social networking. If you notice that a child has begun viewing internet sites and materials that contain hateful content, using hate-related symbols, or spending time with friends who do, please don't disregard it. It may be a warning sign and present an opportunity for you to intervene and redirect their energies. All right, let's go to the next slide, please. We spoke about true threats, when speech connected with a true threat would be not protected speech. In this slide, I'm not going to read the offensive message, but there are offensive messages directed towards a religious community. This is from a real case. An individual in Iowa with a criminal history involving firearms sent 2 Facebook messages to a religious organization in Massachusetts. The first message contained hateful statements about members of the religion. And the second message included pictures, or a picture of someone with an assault rifle, and has another hateful message that says that this is for the followers of that religion, said in a much more offensive way. And in another part of the message, the perpetrator noted that there was an intent to destroy members of the community. All of these messages taken together could constitute a true threat. While one statement, an offensive statement to a particular religion, may be protected hate speech, here where there is an actual true threat, this would not be protected speech. And here, this evidence led to a guilty plea. Let's go on to the next slide, please. Some hate incidents may not be a federal hate crime or a state hate crime, but they may be incidents of unlawful discrimination. The U.S. Attorney's Office, the Justice Department Civil Rights Division, and some state and local offices enforce statutes that ban discrimination. The U.S. Attorney's Office and the Justice Department Civil Rights Division enforce federal statutes prohibiting discrimination on the basis of race, color, sex, including sexual orientation, gender identity, religion, disability, family status, national origin, and citizenship status. The focus of today's presentation is not on unlawful discrimination, but if you are aware of incidents of unlawful discrimination, including discrimination based on religion, you can reach out to your local U.S. Attorney's offices or the Justice Department's Civil Rights Division. I will highlight one incident of civil discrimination that my office handled in recent years. You know, the next slide, please. One of the civil rights statutes we enforce is known as RLUIPA, the Religious Land Use and Institutionalized Persons Act. The U.S. Attorney's Office in New Jersey, together with the Justice Department Civil Rights Division, brought a lawsuit against Bernards Township, New Jersey. There, an Islamic organization sought to build a mosque on its property where houses of worship were essentially permitted as of right. The mosque zoning proposal, as we alleged in our complaint, was met with vociferous anti-Muslim bigotry. And then when the zoning application came before the zoning planning board, as we alleged in our complaint, although other similarly situated houses of worship were approved, the board added a new requirement, asked questions outside of the zoning application, and held 39 hearings over nearly 4 years before finally denying the application. We there alleged that this was discrimination on the basis of religion and the zoning denial, and we obtained a resolution requiring the approval of the mosque's application to build, and they plan to open their doors later this year. Let's go to the next slide, please. So there is a difference between hate crimes and hate incidents, though there's certainly overlap at times. We're not asking you to become an expert as to what is a hate crime, a hate incident, or discrimination. We just ask you to report. Even when a hate incident cannot be prosecuted, information about the event is still useful to law enforcement. Data about hate incidents helps police understand more about trends in the community and may help officers investigate future hate crimes. Reporting to the police also helps bring awareness to the problem within a community. So let's say you've experienced a hate crime or watched a hate crime occur or a hate incident occur. What should you do? First, get help immediately by dialing 911. In addition to sending out whatever emergency personnel are necessary, calling 911 will allow you to report the crime to your local police department. Once everyone is safe, we also encourage you to contact your local FBI field office to report the crime so that they can investigate if any federal hate crime laws were violated. And you can do this by going to www.fbi.gov/tips. Please include as many details of the incident as possible, such as dates, times, and names of possible witnesses. Also provide the FBI with any supporting documents, such as police and medical reports or photographs. The FBI field office will alert the U.S. Attorney's Office and the Justice Department Civil Rights Division if the incident may implicate federal civil rights laws. You may also reach out to your U.S. Attorney's Office or the Justice Department Civil Rights Division if you believe it may be an incident of civil discrimination. And please encourage victims to report and seek support services, such as counseling, to help cope with the crime. And we just can't emphasize enough that reporting hate crimes is critical because it can help police solve cases to get dangerous criminals off the street before they can harm anyone else. It can also alert the police to a problem affecting a community which they may be unaware of. Reporting provides them with the opportunity to devote additional resources to prevent further harm. But we understand that reporting a crime to the police can also be a challenge and scary experience as well. But we encourage you to report. Let's go to the next slide, please. So we've spoken about some horrific attacks on houses of worship. and tragically, these have occurred in recent years. And they are very frequently hate crimes, like the attack on the Tree of Life Synagogue in Pittsburgh, the attack on the AME Church in Charleston, and others. We're going to show you a video called Walking in Oak Creek, which is about a community's effort to heal following a deadly hate crime that killed 6 worshipers in a Sikh temple in Oak Creek, Wisconsin in 2012. This film was produced in conjunction with the U.S. Department of Justice's COPS Office as part of the Not in Our Town Working Together for Safe, Inclusive Communities initiative. If we go ahead and play the video. I think we're on the next slide, and we should be playing the video.
Oak Creek 911, where's your emergency?
Yeah, I was just going to Sikh temple and I was in the parking lot and I think someone was shooting some guy with a turban.
He's in a church with a gun?
Yeah, I can hear it in there. He's in there shooting people.
A white supremacist fueled by hatred walked into our local Gurdwara with a loaded gun. He killed my mother while she prayed. He shot and killed 5 more men.
I think this is an assault on all of us. It's an assault on anybody who's a Milwaukeean, a Wisconsinite, an American, a human being.
Tonight, we are celebrating the lives of 6 victims who tragically lost their lives on Sunday, August 5th, 2012.
I don't know anybody personally that goes to the Sikh temple here, but it still hits close to home. He very well could have walked into my church and done the same thing.
The whole point of a candlelight vigil is that light embodies the hope that we have amongst this darkness. So many people were getting together blocks away from where this happened without any fear and with so much love. It was tremendous.
Here in the Milwaukee area, you never think that it would happen in your own backyard. But then again, on Sunday, it did. And we go to a point where it calls us to action.
In 28 years of law enforcement, I have seen a lot of hate, I've seen a lot of revenge, and I've seen a lot of anger. What I saw, particularly from the Sikh community this week, was compassion, concern, and support.
My dad is the first one to help protect that temple. It was his, it was ours. He lost his life.
So this video shows the devastating impact hate crimes can have on individuals in their communities, but it also shows the potential for communities to begin the healing process by coming together and supporting one another. Let's go to the next slide, please. We're at the end of this presentation, but I want to highlight the DOJ hate crime website. You can find out more about what DOJ is doing to address hate crimes on our website at justice.gov/hatecrimes. And in addition to the information about our cases and national hate crime statistics, there are resources for individuals and community organizations. You can also request additional trainings for your community on the DOJ hate crime website by clicking there. And we also encourage you to reach out to your local U.S. Attorney's offices. And with that, I will pass it back to you, Harpreet.
Thank you, Michael. That was a very informative and detailed presentation. Really appreciate it. We will definitely, audience members, have time for Q&A at the end of this program. So please do put your questions in the chat, and we will definitely ask them to Michael. Without further ado, we're going to move on to our second speaker, and that is Stephen Long, who's a protective security advisor at the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency at Homeland Security. So he's going to go over securing places of worship and an overview of active shooter. Handing baton to you, Stephen.
Thank you, Harpreet. Good afternoon, everybody, and to those of you out on the West Coast, good morning. It's a pleasure to be here to join you today. My name is Steve Long. I'm a protective security advisor with the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency. Today, our nation faces a dynamic threat environment, and unfortunately, calls for violence geared towards houses of worship have continued to grow. Houses of worship pose a unique threat. A unique challenge in the fact that the need to balance enhanced security measures off of an opening and welcoming environment. Today, I want to talk to you a little bit, introduce you to the PSA program, the Protective Security Advisor program, and as well as talk to you about the four-step process that CISA has developed in order to help mitigate attacks on houses of worship. Next slide, please. So the PSA program, we're located all over the country. There's roughly 120 of us located in 10 different regions that mirror the FEMA regions. We have 5 core mission areas to protect critical infrastructure. We conduct voluntary, non-regulatory surveys and assessments on critical infrastructure and facilities. We conduct outreach activities with critical infrastructure owners and operators, community groups, and faith-based organizations in support of CISA priorities, much like what we're doing here today. We also support national security, special security events, which are things like the inauguration and the State of the Union. And we also support SEER events, which is special event activity rating events. These events are things like all the way up to a SEER 1 event, which would be like the Super Bowl, all the way down to a SEER 5, which is a local county event. We also respond to incidents. We will respond to FEMA RRCCs, which is the Regional Response Coordination Centers, as well as state and local EOCs as requested. And we also coordinate with CISA's Office of Bombing Prevention. We bring explosive device awareness and risk mitigation training to our state and local tribal and territorial partners. Next slide, please. This is a national map of breaking out our regions. So there is a protective security advisor near you. There's at least one in every state. And for those of you way out west in Hawaii, you're covered by Region 9. For those of you way up in the Northwest in Alaska, you're covered by Region 10. And for those of you in Puerto Rico and the U.S. Virgin Islands, you're covered by Region 2 out of New York City. Next slide, please. So we've developed a 4-step process in continuing security improvement cycle. Step 1 would be start the process. Step 2 is conduct an assessment. Step 3 is implement security improvements. And step 4 is test your security improvements. And I will be going deeper into all of these during our presentation. Next slide. So step 1, you want to create a security team to manage, lead the coordination, planning, implementation, and security improvements to secure faith-based facilities. So the core roles of this team should be to identify priorities and a vision for your facility's future security, identify available support and resources we can assist you with in the process. Today, I'm going to show you a myriad of CISA resources. We're not the only resource out there, but I'm going to show you the CISA resources that are available to help you in this process. You should engage with your state and local law enforcement for emergency planning purposes, because they're really the ones who are going to be responding, and they really need to be involved in your planning process. PSA Steve Long is not going to be the one responding when you have an incident. It's going to be your local police departments, your county police departments, and your state police departments. become aware of local and regional threats and concerns, and lead the organization through the security process. Next slide, please. So step one was start the process. Here are some resources that we have. We have our House of Worship Security Guide, where CISA took 10 years of targeted attacks against houses of worship to provide context to enterprise-wide security recommendations. The case studies reviewed are examples of the breadth of threats faced by house of worship today. So you also notice this slide deck, all my bullets are in blue. This slide deck will be made available to you, and these are all directly linked to the resource. So we also have a Protecting Houses of Worship video. Today, houses of worship face a unique set of safety and security challenges that weren't there just a few years ago. This video offers a look at those challenges and demonstrates how law enforcement, houses of worship, and other partners can work together to report suspicious behavior and raise awareness, security awareness, while forging positive relationships with the community. So we also have our Houses of Worship Hometown Security Report series from May 2017. Numerous estimates that there are between 300 and 400,000 houses of worship in the United States. Many people think that house of worships are still a safe haven, and we're coming to find out that that's not really the case anymore. Violence is not a new phenomenon in house of worship, and facilities are developing and updating security and emergency plans and procedures to ensure the safety and security of their congregations, visitors, staff, and facilities. Another great resources is your protective security advisors like myself. Like I said, there's 120 of us across the country. We also do security assessments. But like I just said, there's between 300 and 400,000 houses of worship in the United States, and there's only 120 of us. So it is a big workload for us, and it's not our sole priority. Another resource for information sharing is the Faith-Based Information Sharing and Analysis Organization. They're a trusted community within the exclusive community of faith. The ISAO and its members maintain primary focus on sharing timely, actionable, and relevant information with an all-hazards approach as incidents affecting the community come in the form of physical threats, cybersecurity issues, health outbreaks, and a variety of natural disasters. And then we have HISN, which is DHS's secure information sharing network. Next slide, please. So step 2 is conduct an assessment. Now we have our House of Worship security self-assessment and user guide. The first step in developing a quality security plan or program and improving preparedness is assessing the organization or facility's current risk. To begin that process, CISA has developed a baseline security self-assessment that is designed to assist minimally trained personnel through the assessment process. Successful completion and review of the recommendations can provide a path towards lowering risk and improving security. So to go with that, we have our House of Worship Security Self-Assessment Tool. It's an interactive web-based tool that you can find at CISA.gov. And again, you'll be provided my presentation with the link in there. To make a self-assessment process easier, CISA, we've developed an interactive tool which duplicates the data collected in the paper-based version that I talked about above. And the faith-based organization's House of Worship Security Self-Assessment. When properly completed, it will provide an electronic and paper-based report that can be used to easily inform security planning and improvement decisions. And last, we have our CISA bombing prevention and protective measures awareness training, and that is our BPAC course, and that is a one-day course where you go and you can learn about the rings of security, physical, procedural, and technical, and intelligence protective measures. Next slide, please. So step 3, this is where you've done your assessments, you've done your planning, and now you're implementing your security measures. We have the securing soft targets in crowded places handbook, and in order to support America's citizens with improving their own security and safety by mitigating a potential risk associated with today's threat environment, CISA has developed a number of resources focused on improving security, implementing protective measures associated with soft target crowded places. This resource guide is a list of hundreds of resources for protecting not just houses of worship, but the broader soft target crowded places environment. Next, we have our active assailant security resources. This is where you'll find, which everyone's interested in, is your active shooter resources. Active shooter incidents are unpredictable and evolve quickly. In the midst of chaos, anyone can play an integral role in mitigating the impacts of an active shooter incident. DHS aims to enhance preparedness through the whole community approach by providing products, tools, resources to help you prepare for, respond to an active shooter attack. So within our active shooter portfolio, we have active shooter preparedness guides that teach you how to prepare and respond to an active shooter event. We have in-person and virtual workshops where we have a headquarters staff that will come out and conduct a workshop on active shooter planning. We have active shooter mitigation and security guidance, which that's more in line with the planning and preparedness documents that I talked about. We have instructional and informational videos, where we have options for considerations. We have one for House of Worship. We also have one which includes our run, hide, fight, because in the active shooter doctrine that we prescribe to is the run, hide, fight. First, you want to try and get away by running. You want to, if that is not an option, you want to hide and conceal yourself, and then at the very last resort, fight. So FEMA has a very good guide for developing high quality emergency operations plans for houses of worship. And then what you'll hear about later from Mark, who will follow me, is the FEMA grants program. And the nonprofit security grant, our assessment is required, whether it is the assessment that the PSA will come do for you or your self-assessment. And Mark will talk more about that. And then, of course, we have the Power of Hello for houses of worship. This is a more focused guide that promotes employee vigilance for houses of worship stakeholders. Alert personnel can spot suspicious activity and actively report it. Keeping houses of worship facilities secure while sustaining the open and welcoming environment necessary for peaceful congregation requires a holistic approach to security. Next slide, please. So now that you've implemented all of your security improvements, now it's time to test your security improvements to see how well you did. And while exercises can be contracted through numerous private sector companies, most local, county, and state Homeland Security offices offer no-cost exercises or resources which will allow you to participate in ongoing programs or develop your own exercise. An additional resource is your local CISA Protective Security Advisor, who can guide you through available resources and how to best use them in the results you identify. So CISA also, we have our own CISA tabletop exercise package for faith-based organizations. The CTAP program is designed to assist critical infrastructure owner and operators in developing their own tabletop exercises to meet specific needs of their facilities and stakeholders. CTEP allows users to leverage pre-built exercise templates and vetted scenarios to build tabletop exercises to assess, develop, and update information sharing process, emergency plans, programs, policies, and procedures. Now, I will say every CISA regional office has a regional training and exercise coordinator that is available to assist in creating a tabletop exercise through your protective security advisor. And then FEMA also has its own exercise resources across the United States. Americans congregate in faith-based venues to worship, learn, play, and bond as a community. In coordination with the interagency partners, the DHS Center for Faith-Based and Neighborhood Partnerships and FEMA established a website for the faith-based organizations that serve as a one-stop shop for information on available federal tools, resources, and assistance. So this concludes my, next slide, concludes my presentation. As you can see at the end of the slide, I have the direct link if you would like more information to faith-based houses of worship. Also, if you would like to get in contact with your local protective security advisor, email our headquarters central@cisa.dhs.gov. That will go to CISA Central, who will in turn farm that request out to their region. Then your local region will have your local protective security advisor get into contact with you.
Thank you, Stephen. Really appreciate that. Again, a very informative presentation. Again, folks, we will be sharing his slide deck with you on the resources that he had mentioned in there. So just wait for that. And also, again, please continue to put your questions in the chat for Stephen, and we'll definitely address them during the Q&A session. Our next session is with our friend from FEMA, Mark Silvera. He's a senior advisor and branch chief there. He's going to go over grants and other resources, and especially the nonprofit security grant. I'm going to hand the baton off to Mark and go to the races.
Thank you, Harpreet, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak today. And I'm going to start off with sharing my screen so we can run through a short list of slides, do a general overview of the program itself, and when I step off stage and folks are sort of wrapping up today's presentation, I'll put a sequence of links in the chat for everybody, including my contact information. So let me go ahead and share the slides. You should be able to see them at this point. So I will just move along from there. So my name is Mark Silvera, and I'm a senior advisor, branch chief, and the national program manager for the Department of Homeland Security, FEMA's nonprofit security grant program. This is a little bit of the guiding principles, if you will, the overview purpose of the program. It's obviously a federal grant program that is offered annually. It's appropriated by Congress, part of our portfolio of preparedness programs over here at DHS FEMA. It's competitive in nature. It's for 501c3s that can describe, justify, or articulate at being potential risk of terrorist attack. It's specifically for 501c3s or those organizations that are tax exempt as 501as, and most of those are houses of worship. This program has been around for over 17 years. It's not a new program. It's actually been part of the DHS FEMA portfolio for a number of years now. The only interesting about the program is obviously everything that you heard from the illustrious speakers to this point. There has been a history of unfortunate, terrible, just heinous events that have taken place in the nonprofit community, and particularly houses of worship and other areas that are undersecured. So in 2018, this program actually did its first large expansion, if you will, with the introduction of a second funding stream. So prior to 2018, It was a single funding stream for the nonprofit security grant program, and it was limited to those nonprofit organizations that were one of the Department of Homeland Security's designated high-risk urban areas. And those urban areas vary year to year, depend on whatever the secretary deems are the highest risk urban areas in the nation. In 2018, a second funding source was introduced, which included making funding available for all those nonprofits that were not located in the high-risk urban areas. So that was the first big major muscle movement under the program. After that, it sort of year over year, the funding had increased, and we'll talk about this year and last year, just to give you some context of how much funding actually flows through this program, if you're not already aware. There is only one eligible applicant to the federal government through this program, and that is the state. The states, 56 states and territories, are the only eligible applicant to FEMA for the Nonprofit Security Grant Program. So what this means is that nonprofit organizations are subgrantees or subrecipients or sub-applicants, the sub being the key word, and at the designated time that the states provide, nonprofit organizations submit their applications to the state. And then by the time the federal government tells states that they have an application deadline, the states on your behalf will submit all of those applications to FEMA. Now, under the program itself, the general allowable costs are all security related. So it has to do with facility hardening of the physical infrastructure, its surroundings, and providing planning, training, and exercise type activities, as previously mentioned by my colleague in CISA, to better educate and inform the congregants, members of your 501c3, your nonprofit organization. It's basically for those people at that location of where the application is being submitted. So as mentioned, there's a three-step process, if you will, and how the information flows out to the nonprofits and then returns from the nonprofits back to the federal government. Federal government on a announcement date, which is usually 60 days after the enactment of an annual appropriation, will publish all of the written materials associated with the grant program. And in this case, they're on the FEMA website, on the DHS website. They are through our listserv. We promulgate them to the states, and everything sort of spreads out from there. Our partners at the Department of Justice, as well as in the DHS Center for Faith-Based and Neighborhood Partnerships, they all promulgate our information when it's publicly available. At this point, the information is on the street. It gives deadlines, it gives criteria, mission purpose, allowability, etc., that are associated with that particular year's grant program, including who's eligible, how the process flows for submitting an application, and then the deadlines. So the key thing is, remember, on the FEMA website, under the Nonprofit Security Grant Program program folder, there's a list of state administrative agency points of contact. Good to have, good to bookmark, good to copy down, to have available if you are planning on applying for this grant. You want to be in contact early and often with your state administrative agency point of contact. Those are generally the offices of emergency management at the state level, the offices of Homeland Security at the state level. Some of them are called the offices of Homeland Security and Military Affairs. There's 56 states and territories. Everyone has one of these offices, and within those offices, there's a point of contact that specifically manages the nonprofit security grant program for their jurisdiction. So nonprofits apply to the state applies to FEMA. FEMA does the secondary competitive review process, makes award recommendations, and then finally makes awards to the state later in the fiscal year. As mentioned, back in 2018 is when this program took its largest leap forward with the introduction of a second funding stream. Half the money goes to those nonprofit organizations that are located in a designated urban area, and half the money goes to nonprofits that are not not located in a designated urban area. Also, if the designated urban area label is confusing or you're not sure what I mean, there's two ways of finding out if your physical location is located in a designated urban area. One, the list of those designated urban areas, which is city and counties surrounding major metropolitan areas, are located in the Nonprofit Security Grant Program as well as the Homeland Security Grant Program. As well as, if you're not sure, you always can reach out to your state administrative agency point of contact. They absolutely know if, based on your street location of the application that you're submitting, if you are or are not located in one of the urban areas. That all boils down to which funding source that you should apply for. It's either A or B, right? It's either the UA funding or the S funding, the Nonprofit Security Grant Program urban area funding stream or the state funding stream. That's what that is used for. So in general, the application package, if you will, consists of 4 buckets. One of them obviously is the FEMA created investment justification form. That is the application for NSGP. The other 3 are documents that are required or optional in the package that's submitted from the nonprofit to the state. And the key with this visual is where all the arrows point. The federal government only obtains and uses the investment justification form for the federal review process. So let me tell you how this works. The application is open and available for people to apply. As part of the application requirements, you must send your mission statement, a completed vulnerability assessment, which was mentioned by my colleague from CISA, as well as any supplemental documents that the state may require or will accept that helps you articulate, justify, or describe particular threats or other types of situations that have befalled your organization, and you've got basically paperwork on it, right? Whether it's insurance claims, police reports, internet threats, etc. So all of that is part of the package. That, along with the investment justification, so there's 4 things, are submitted to the state. Your investment justification is the only thing that comes to the federal government when the state submits on your behalf. So as part of their due diligence and in the time between their application deadline and the federal application deadline, there are 2 of them, the time that the state wants you to make your submission to them, so it gives them enough time for them to do their, what we call first stage review and scoring and prioritization, and they have to be able to do all that in time to submit the investment justification on your behalf to us at FEMA by our published deadline. Anything after our published deadline is considered non-competitive. So the investment justification is basically the executive summary. It has information that we ask for in the investment justification that's associated with your mission statement. We have a section of the investment justification that asks you to articulate your priority items that you have rated as the highest priority as far as vulnerabilities are concerned of the physical structure in your surrounding property, as well as the supplemental documents, the optional documents. That's your information to help you better articulate other sections of the investment justification that ask about threat, risk, vulnerability, and consequence. So all that is to say, 1, the state asks for, in a lot of cases, more stuff than the federal government does. And on the federal side, we only use the executive summary, which is the investment justification, when it comes to doing an assessment and making recommendations for grant awards annually. That also safeguards all nonprofits, since these are federal grant funds, they are taxpayers' dollars. The potential of FOIA, of information against the federal government, against this program, is always out there. So we just want the basic information, the executive summary, the high points, the key points, however you want to characterize that in the investment justification, so we can make an informed decision and run that through the competition to come out with the final results in a competitive program. So last year, fiscal year 21, was double that of the previous year. So in fiscal year 2020, there was $90 million in the program. In 2021, $180 million in the program. $180 million was split between the two funding sources that I've talked about several times already. Each was $90 million, and that was significantly higher than the prior year, as well as there was limitations to how much funding an organization could ask for. Excuse me. So individual application, investment justification could ask for $150,000 per physical location, up to 3 physical locations per organization. So I like to use the adage is if you have a campus that has a house of worship, a daycare, and a school, 3 unique buildings, 3 unique street addresses, but all part of the same organization. If you wanted to, you could apply for 1 investment justification for each of those 3 with a total funding of $450 spread out over the 3 buildings. All right, so after we did the multi-phase scoring and prioritization, the states do their scoring and prioritization recommendations of all recipients, subrecipients' investments they receive, and then it goes through a 2-part process at the federal level. So last year, under the urban area fiscal year 21 program, we received just under 2,000 applications, representing over $263 million in request. Obviously, in that funding stream, we only had $90 million to give out. So you can see how competitive this particular program and more specifically this funding stream is. Under the Nonprofit Security Grant Program state funding stream, we received a little bit over 1,300 applications for a requested amount of funding of just over 136 million. Again, still substantially more than the $90 million we had to actually award. After the federal review, scoring, and allocation processes were completed, under the Nonprofit Security Grant Program urban area funding stream, we made 656 awards. 62% of those were first-time recipients of the program, and under the state funding stream, 876 awards. About 23% of those were first-time recipients. All right. So what we are doing right now, we are in the throes of the fiscal year 22 Nonprofit Security Grant Program. Nonprofit Security Grant Program for this current fiscal year went from 180 to $250 million. That's $70 million more than last year. There's a couple of differences in the program, and we will talk about those. Just key in on this slide. There's 2 subsequent slides that have highlighted areas which will point out the differences from last year's program to this year's program. The key thing here is obviously the increase in funding of $70 million, as well as the state administrative agencies, the state offices, now will be able to retain up to 5% of the funding that they receive to manage and administer the grant. Prior to this, since the inception of the program back in 2004-2005 timeframe, the states have received no funding to support the nonprofit community through this grant program. This will be the first year they do so. Funding streams remain consistent. There is a Nonprofit Security Grant Program urban funding stream, as explained earlier. It's for those nonprofits that are located physically in one of the high-risk urban areas, as well as the Nonprofit Security Grant Program state funding stream is for those nonprofits that are located outside of one of the high-risk urban areas. Same goes with the per investment justification cap of $150,000 per individual site for up to 3 sites per organization, for a total of $450 million. As you notice this slide, there's 2 bullets on the bottom of each side. So in fiscal year 22, as part of the scoring process, we also added bonus points for nonprofit organizations that were located in the CDC's Social Vulnerability Index locations of high and very high, as well as we increased the amount of points for first-time recipients of this program. And finally, what we saw. So last week, 2 weeks ago. The applications came in on this program, and this is what we saw the day of the application deadline. Over 3,400 applications representing over $447 million in ask under this program for this year. Just over 2,100 applications representing $284 million across the 36 designated urban areas, and just over 1,300 applications requesting just over $163 million through the 56 states and territories state nonprofit security grant program funding stream. So as mentioned, on the 13th of June, it was the application deadline submission. On the 27th of this month, was just a couple of days ago, the applications were entered into the review process. Sometime after the 11th of July, the process will be completed, and then sometime in August, we will be making award allocation recommendations to the Secretary's office for final approval. This is who I am. I'm Mark Silvera, and here's the email address if you have any questions about the Nonprofit Security Grant Program. That's FEMA-NSGP@fema.dhs.gov. And I want to thank you for spending time with us today. I'd like to thank my host, Harpreet, and I will turn the baton back over to you, Harpreet.
Thank you so much, Mark. Always very informative, and there are a bunch of questions for you as always, so we're going to definitely ask them to you in the next part. We're going to now move on to the Q&A portion of this information session, and we'll have all our speakers online to answer any of your questions. So if you have any other questions, please submit them in the chat, and that way we'll definitely have an opportunity to ask our speakers here. We'll start off with the first question. It's for Mr. Campion. How do you report hate crimes? Meaning you had made a list of report details, dates, times, witnesses. Could you elaborate on that a little more? And then part two of that is that if you are a victim of a hate crime, do you call 911? And then do you separately call FBI and U.S. Attorney's Office, or is there one entity that contacts everybody?
Thanks, Harpreet. Good question. So if you witness or see a hate crime, first call 911. But we would ask you to then, after that, contact the FBI in the website that we provided before, which I don't have immediately in front of me, but I'm sure we can put it on the chat.
Sure.
And so, yes, contact both. While it's certainly possible, if you report to 911, that the FBI would ultimately be contacted, it does not always happen. And so we urge you to contact also the FBI. And with the reports, I mean, it obviously depends on the circumstances, but usually provide information about what you witnessed, what you experienced. And one other thing I'll note, depending on what state you live in, you may also want to reach out to your state attorney general's office or state local authorities.
All right, thank you. We have some follow-up questions regarding if I'm an undocumented person, why should I report, and are there any protections for me?
We encourage everyone to report if they've seen a hate crime. In terms of protections, what I can say is your immigration status is almost always irrelevant to anything we're looking at when we're looking at a federal hate crime or discrimination. Happy to talk more offline about that, but that's about what I can say at this point.
Okay. Our next question has to do with repeated. A victim is a victim of repeated name calling and now is becoming fearful of this and has not reported. They're asking, should they report this to police? And what will be the next process? What will be the next steps?
Yes, we would urge everyone to report to the police, the FBI, and in some cases the U.S. Attorney's Office. You could always report to the U.S. Attorney's Office, actually. It could be that the conduct that this person's being subjected to is happening to others, and so law enforcement could connect that, and that would be useful information for law enforcement. And there may be other support systems in place in the local community or through the federal level. So we always urge you to report, and then we can address it depending on what the facts are in the specific case.
Is there a time frame to report a hate crime? Meaning, is there a statute of limitations or a limitation? Is it 1 day, 1 month, or 1 year from the incident?
Yeah, there's no time frame as to when you should report it. Always report it. Report it sooner rather than later, so we can address it more quickly. Yes, there may be statutes of limitations with particular statutes, and statutes have different statutes of limitations, but they're in usually several years. So if it's happened within the last few years, it's certainly relevant to report to us. And if it's the same perpetrator doing something over and over, it's really important that we know that. So even in the unlikely event that it was past a statute of limitations, we would still find that to be very valuable information.
Thank you. One more question. I'll ask it as a combined question. One pastor has reported that they've had their sign vandalized, and but they have not reported it to the local police. Should they? And that's part one. And then a second question is that a second place of worship has reported to law enforcement defacing of religious property, the church and statutes, but the police always categorize it as vandalism and not as a hate crime. What can we do?
Okay. On the first question, yes, report. It may be a hate crime, and it certainly should be reported, defacing. On the second question, sometimes local law enforcement might not be familiar with federal hate crime laws, and they're in the state that this vandalism took place in may not have a state hate crime law. So while it may be, crimes can certainly be both a state crime, for example, some sort of vandalism type crime, but they could also be a federal hate crime. So that's why we believe it's important that you not only report to your local law enforcement through 911, but to report to the FBI, because the FBI would look at it through a federal lens of federal hate crimes.
All right, thank you, Michael. Really appreciate that. We're going to move on to our to Stephen. A question for you is, where do you get and how can I arrange an active shooter training? Will you come out to my place of worship, or is it done virtually, or both?
So we can do both. We also partner with local and state law enforcement to do active shooter trainings. My advice to that would be get in contact with your local protective security advisor at central@cisa.dhs.gov and have that conversation with your local protective security advisor.
You had mentioned that the protective security advisors do assessments of weaknesses in infrastructures. Again, do you do that alone, or do you do that in partnership with law enforcement?
Sure.
And do you have to book that? How do you go about, setting an appointment for inviting you to the place of worship?
So if you want your protective security advisor local to come out and do an assessment, first they'll reach out to CISA Central again, and they'll probably set up an assist visit with you to figure out what your needs are. The safe assessment that we do, I know when I go out, I always invite state, local, and depending on the type of facility, a federal, somebody from the local FBI office. But I always like to include personally, I like to include the local first responders because they're the ones coming. So they're the ones who should know the lay of the land of your facility. You don't want to be exchanging business cards for the first time on the day of an incident. That's where we like to leave it.
And are all the trainings that you mentioned and this assessment, or do they have a cost or are they free of cost?
All of our services are free of charge.
Okay. And I wanted to ask you, when you had mentioned at times after you do the assessment, do you help write the report or give them something in writing? And can they use that for that investment justification that Mark had referred to?
So yes. So when you get a safe assessment, you'll get when we do a safe assessment, which is a security at first entry, the PSA will hand you back a report with some options for consideration in. The same thing goes for the self-assessment report. You will get it will generate a written report that will give you options for consideration, and both are eligible to be submitted for the nonprofit security grant.
Wonderful. And again, just to repeat, where can people go to reach out to their local PSAs?
Yep. Central at CISA.dhs.gov, and that goes to CISA Central, which is our national clearinghouse. They will contact your local region, and then that regional office will have your local PSA reach out to you.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. We have a next set of questions for Mark Silvera. Mark, I'm just going to roll up my sleeves and jump into this. What is the max amount of grant that's awarded to, the grant to write, or the grant applying institution?
Right. So there's there's two avenues of receiving grants, in that it's per individual physical location, and then it's a collection of locations under the same organization. So each individual location cannot exceed 150K, and an organization's submission cannot exceed 3 unique locations. So it's 150 per location up to 450 per organization, which equates to 3 separate locations. So there's a couple of ways of looking at this. If you have a headquarters nonprofit in an urban area, they would apply for $150,000 under the Urban Area Security Initiative, Urban Area Security Initiative nonprofit funding stream, and they have 2 satellite locations that are located other places within the state, not in the urban area. Each one of those affiliated organizational locations would apply each for 150 under the state program, where that would give a total of 3 locations per organization and no more than 450K combined for all 3. And if you wanted to apply for just one project for 100,000 or 50,000, then that's fine too. 150 is the max per site. 450 is the max per organization. So we see nonprofit medical institutions that have 4 or 5 or 6 facilities spread out all over the state. They can only apply for 3 of those. They're going to have to pick the 3 top priority locations. That maxes them out at 3 locations per organization for 450K. I hope I came at that a couple of different ways to try to answer that question.
How do you know if you're in an urban area or a non-urban area?
Right. So there's a list of the designated urban areas in the notice of funding opportunity for both the nonprofit security grant program and in the Homeland Security Grant Program, which it's a program 2 clicks up from the nonprofit. They're all in alphabetical order. The other thing is, if you're not sure or cannot navigate, and I noticed Marcus put the link to the materials in the chat, you can definitely talk to your state administrative agency and say, hey, I am this organization, this is where I'm located. Would I by chance be in one of the designated urban areas for fiscal year 22? And in this case would be fiscal year 23, because the next offering of this grant won't be until Congress passes a budget for fiscal year 23. So that will be sometime after October.
I have some follow-up questions. Do you provide assistance in writing the application, technical assistance, virtual or live assistance? And then also, does the state administrating agency help write or provide technical assistance?
So there's a variety of technical assistance out there. So my office did 60 webinars since October of last year, offering information sharing, technical assistance, and networking for this year's grant program. So yes, there is a limited amount of national level technical assistance offered by my office, as well as depending on what state you reside in. Some states do better than others in providing local level technical assistance, and then not only to prepare for the grant submission, but then post-award grants management technical assistance. And again, it varies by state. We plan this year to offer at the federal level, federal post-award grants management and administration webinar sometime in October this year.
Okay. Do you, if an organization's asking if I win the grant this year, am I allowed to apply for the grant next year? And then
yes, you are.
And then if I do win the grant, how much time do I have to use the money? And do you help with, and do you help with that process? So if I win the money and then the supplication and the process of all the receipts and everything else, is there a hotline that can help us out with that?
Right. Yeah, the hotline is the state administrative agency. So, so the federal government does bulk awards to the state based on the number of nonprofits in their state that were successful in obtaining an award every year. So I'll just use the example. We'll say, I don't know, we'll say Massachusetts, they received so much money out of the state program. They got so much money out of the urban area program because Boston is a designated urban area. So we would send all of that money in an award to the state, and then the state would subdivide or do a sub-recipient agreement or a sub-award to each individual nonprofit that was successful in obtaining an award that year. The relationship, that's why I say call them and have them on speed dial early and often. Since the state is the grantee, they're responsible for helping the sub-grantees manage and administer their nonprofit security grant program, and they are the ones that would be doing the reimbursement of your invoices and your bills as you start doing your projects and activities at your nonprofit.
All right, Mark, thank you so much. We have more questions for you always. I can see them in the chat, but unfortunately, our time is running out. But I wanted to thank all our speakers for their presentations and making some really great presentations. I wanted to also say we will be sharing these resources with you very soon. And then I'd also recommend that you fill out our evaluation. The link is there, and also you can scan it. But please let us know how this presentation worked, what didn't work, and what more information can we provide for you. With that, I wanted to thank again all our speakers, CRS leadership, the Department of Justice leadership. I also wanted to give a shout out to our technical team, Kayla Owens and Fran Maxwell, for all their help in putting this forward. And again, I put my contact information in the chat. We are doing this virtually. This was a 90-minute session. We can also do it live in person, which will be for 3 hours. So if you need assistance, please reach out and email us, and we'll try to help you out and go from there. We thank you again for your attendance. Please do fill out this survey, and we appreciate you. And have a great and blessed day. Thank you.